Left, that great big monument is the monument to Sir Walter Scott. That's a Scott monument. It started to be built in 1840, took over 4 years to build. It is 200 feet 6 inches high, 287 steps to the very top. You can do guided tours of the Scott monument, and they say the best views across the city are from the top of the Scott monument. But there is no lift or elevator, so if you want to climb to the very top, you need to climb 287 steps under your own steam. I personally need oxygen by the time I reach the top, but I can assure you the views are absolutely wonderful. So that's the monument to Sir Walter Scott. That's Sir Walter Scott's statue at the very bottom, the light grey statue. It's an Italian marble, and he has his dog Maida with him. And there are 64 little statues around the Scott monument, all characters from the novels written by Sir Walter Scott. So we're in Princes Street. Princes Street originally built as a residential area for the nobility and middle classes. If you look to your left now, you can see at Princes Street it's no longer residential, it's our main shopping street. The building over here on our right, this is the Balmoral Hotel, 5-star hotel, built in 1902. The clock tower at the very top is a few minutes fast, and that's to allow people to catch their trains on time, because the railway station lies directly behind the Balmoral Hotel. Left is General Register House, designed by Robert Adam, built as part of the Georgian New Town. It holds all the births, deaths and marriages for the whole of Scotland. So that's the place to go to trace your family tree. And the man in the statue here on our left is the Duke of Wellington, sitting on his horse Copenhagen. So the next stop on your map is stop 2 for Carlton Hill. So that's that tree-lined area. Are you going to get off here?
No, we're going to go.
We're not going to get off here, the couple are going to stay on. But Carlton Hill, lovely views, lots of statues and monuments up there. The great big tall monument in front that looks like an upside down telescope is to Lord Nelson, built after the Battle of Trafalgar, and you can climb Nelson's monument. And that's the steps just there on our left. You can see it's a very short walk to the top of Carlton Hill, and you do get wonderful views.
And it'll happen.
Now over here on our right, this is St Andrew's House. That's the Scottish office. That's where the civil servants are based. You can see it's very much an Art Deco building, and it was built in 1939, just before the outbreak of the Second World War. And it was built on top of what used to be a jail, Carlton Jail. So that's St Andrew's House. Now we're on Regent Road. Now if you look just ahead of us on our right, you can see that great big hill. That's the Salisbury Crags. That's volcanic rock, over 340 million years old. Now you can climb to the top of the Salisbury Crags, and there we can see lots of people up there. Now you're going to have to take my word for it. Behind the Salisbury Crags there is another hill that's actually shrouded in mist at the moment. That's Arthur's Seat, again an extinct volcano over 340 million years old. You can climb both hills. Now the little monument we're passing now on our right with all the pillars going round about, that's to Robert Burns, probably the most famous of the Scottish poets. He's the man said to have written Auld Lang Syne, and they say that's the second most sung song in the world after Happy Birthday. Now through the trees here on our left, these are the townhouses that were built for the nobility when the new town was being built in 1767. American consulates up there now. Very expensive townhouses still today. And part of the reason for that, if you look just through the trees here on our right, they're looking down onto this building with the turrets and the flagpole. That's the Palace of Holyrood House, the official residence for the Queen when she's here in Scotland. And the Queen must, under law, stay 6 nights a year in Scotland, staying in the Palace of Holyrood House. She's been for her annual visit. She was here at the start of July. Now you see in the grounds of the palace there is in fact an abbey, Holyrood Abbey, and the abbey was built first in 1128 by King David I. They say the reason why the king built the abbey, he was out riding one day, fell from his horse, was being attacked by a stag. In between the antlers of the stag was a cross. The king grabbed the cross and the stag ran away. So the king felt that was fully right, he would build an abbey. It was called Holyrood or Holy Cross. And the palace started off as a guest house and stables for the abbey. Became a palace in 1530. So this is for you on
You've already done it.
Oh, you've already done it?
Yep.
Now, when the Queen is here, the palace is shut to the public. It's the smallest of the Queen's palaces. But they say it's actually the palace that the Queen least likes. Her favourite is up in Balmoral, which is up in Royal Deeside, and that's her holiday home. That's where she goes August and September, where she gets away from all the paparazzi and everything that's happening. And that's where her family join her up at certain times. She's up in Balmoral. But when she's here in the palace, she is working. And this year she came up with her son. Prince Charles came and joined her for the first night of her visit, because they were here to commemorate 20 years since Scotland got its devolved parliament on the 1st of July 1999. So there was a ceremony took place in the grounds of our new Scottish Parliament. So the Queen attended that and Prince Charles came with her to England. The little building we're passing here on our left is called Queen Mary's Bathhouse. That was built in the 1500s, and they say that's where Mary Queen of Scots used to bathe in white wine. I think it's more a gardener's cottage than anywhere a queen would bathe. On our left, this is going to be a new visitor centre for the palace and the abbey, due to be completed this year. But if you look to your left, you'll catch a glimpse of the palace, but tucked in at the back is the abbey built in 1128 by King David I. Here on our left, this is the Queen's Gallery, and that's an exhibition of paintings, many of them donated from the Queen's own private collection. We've got a big Russian Romanovs art exhibition on in there at the moment, and you do pay extra to go in and visit the Queen's Gallery. Here on our right, this is our Scottish Parliament. So this building was completed in 2004, but I'll talk about that as we go round. Now, if you keep looking to your left, you'll get a better view of the palace. You can see it's got very much a French feel to it. The king that had the most influence on the building of the palace was Charles II. He loved the French architecture, so the palace looks very much like a French chateau. This is us now in a park. This is Holyrood Park, over a mile square, here in the centre of Edinburgh. It is a public park, and it is a very well used park. And ahead of us there's the Salisbury Crags that we saw from the top of Regent Road. And there on our left there's Arthur's Seat that we couldn't see from the top of Regent Road. And the pathway just coming up here on our left with everyone walking on it, that's taking you up to the start of the climb for Arthur's Seat or for the Salisbury Crags. You can see the sun's going to start to come out. Now, just above the green gorse bushes here on our left, there is in fact a pathway. It's called the Radical Road. It was built by soldiers that came back from the Napoleonic Wars. There was no work for the soldiers, so Sir Walter Scott, the great writer, gave money, and the soldiers built the Radical Road that goes all the way around the Salisbury Crags. So from the top of the Salisbury Crags and the Radical Road, wonderful views over Edinburgh. And that's where you get the little ditty or the little poem from. Round and round the Radical Road, the radical rascal ran. Tell me how many R's in that. Tell me if you can. Have you heard that one before?
No.
Yes. We've left Holyrood Park. We're now into a big regeneration area. This land that we're in now was owned by Scottish and Newcastle Brewery, Edinburgh famous for its beer making. And the brewery gave this land over to Edinburgh Council in the 1990s. So you can see it's very modern. Over on our left we've got a modern office building, and in there we've got the company Rockstar North. They make computer games, they make Grand Theft Auto, and you can see the big sign, they've got Outlaws, big sign for Outlaws of Life, for life. So these computer games are made here in Scotland. Big business. Now the next stop on your map is stop 4 for our dynamic air. This is our dynamic earth here on our right, Edinburgh's Millennium Project. It's a geological exhibition where you can see everything from the Big Bang to the present day. You can walk through a rainforest, touch an iceberg. The same, you can feel the earth move in dynamic earth. The tenting is the top part of dynamic earth. Below the tenting is the cafe part, and then the exhibition halls are all underground. So this is stop 4 for dynamic earth. The last entry is 4:30. It's also a stop if you want to get off here. You can go into Holyrood Park and perhaps climb Arthur's Seat or the Salisbury Cracks. Anyone wanting stop 4? Nope. If you do come back and want to visit Dynamic Earth, you can buy your tickets for Dynamic Earth from our bus drivers. They're £1 cheaper than going into Dynamic Earth itself. Alice. He died before this building was completed in 2004. So some of the symbolism we're not too sure about. We think what looks like hair dryers on the windows are actually curtains being pulled back. So it's an open and transparent government. You've got the Cream building in the middle with the orange roof, and that's Queensberry House, built in the 1600s, and that was the family home for the Marquis of Queensberry that did the rules for boxing. Queensberry House now is all part of our Scottish Parliament, and that's where it's open to the public. That's where our politicians are. Politicians are actually on holiday. They went on their summer holidays the 28th of June, and they won't come back until the 4th of September. But the Scottish Parliament is free and it is open to the public. It is open Monday through to Saturday. Opens 10 in the morning, last entry is 4:30. And I will say, if you do get a chance, come back and visit the Scottish Parliament. Very, very different, very, very modern. It's one of the most eco-friendly parliaments in Europe. It recycles all its own water, and there's free guided tours that take you around and show you how all the different aspects of the Scottish Parliament are affecting people here in Edinburgh. So this is us back into Holyrood Park. There we have people on the very top of the Salisbury Crags. It takes you about 45 minutes to an hour to climb to the very top. Now, this is all part of the Scottish Parliament. The little hills are to represent the mountains of Scotland, the trees, the forests of Scotland. And in between the trees and the little hills is what looks like little walls. That, in fact, is an amphitheatre. You can seats that you can sit on can hold 3,000 people, and we do have concerts here at this part of the city in August. And then ahead of us on our left we've got water features representing the lochs of Scotland. But if you look ahead of us, we can see the other set of gates for the palace, so you get a better view of the unicorn, the national animal of Scotland. And we've got a view of the so you need to sit down, and it's just a little top bus. Now, they say that unicorns are mystical creatures, so Scotland is a mystical country. So these two animals are guarding the palace. And the park that we've just left, that's been a park since the 1500s, when it was originally a royal hunting ground. Now, if you do want to come back and visit the Scottish Parliament, just here on our left, this glass area, is the entrance for the Scottish Parliament. And you can always tell when the Parliament is open. There will be police on guard duty outside. So it does open tomorrow at 10 o'clock. And then if you look just down here on our right there, you've got another view of the Abbey, which was built in 1120. So you've got very old mixing with very new. So you can see why the Scottish Parliament was a wee bit controversial when it was originally built. So this is us now on the Royal Mile. This is the oldest street here in Edinburgh. Starts up at Edinburgh Castle ahead and comes all the way down to the palace and the abbey at the bottom. Slightly longer than a mile. It is an old Scots mile. It's 1.2 miles. Here on our left there's the front of Queensberry House, built in the 1600s, now all part of our Scottish Parliament. Now this is the only stop that we stop on at the Royal Mile, so this is stop 5. And this is for 2 free museums. We've got the People's Story, telling how Edinburgh was built through the eyes of the ordinary people. And the other free museum is the Museum of Edinburgh, where you can see the lead, the licence and the dog bowl of Greyfriars Bobby. And we've also got the Canongate Church here at stop 5. Now the traffic is very, very busy going up the Royal Mile, because on a Sunday the parking restrictions are all lifted, and people that don't normally bring their cars into the city do bring them in on a Sunday. So that's why we've now on diversion. Once we get to the top up by the World's End pub, we'll actually be going on diversion. And the diversions are going to be on from today right through until the 2nd of September, when all the festivals finish. And it's to make it easier for people to walk about the Royal Mile rather than getting caught up with all the traffic.
Can we stop at, I mean, if requested, can we stop at any other point other than the designated stop?
If the driver is able to stop, he'll pull in for you, sir. Just here on our right, that's the Canongate Church, 17th century Church of Scotland. Look to the very top. Behind all the scaffolding, you can see the stag's head with the antlers and the cross. The story I told you about why the abbey was built in 1128. The Canongate Church is the church the Queen attends when she's here in Edinburgh. And that's where Sarah Phillips, the Queen's granddaughter, got married to Mike Tyndall, the rugby player, in the Canongate Church in 2011. It's got a lovely old graveyard at the back. Adam Smith, who wrote Wealth of Nations, is buried in there. And Robert Ferguson, another of our great Scottish poets, is also buried in the Canongate graveyard. Now people, it does close at 5 o'clock. And then here on our left is the other free museum, the Museum of Edinburgh, where you can see the lead, the licence and the dog bowl of Greyfriars Bobby. So we're going up the Royal Mile, and it's divided into 5 streets. Behind us at the very bottom is the Abbey Strand, and that's where the Palace and Abbey are. And we're on the Canongate, and this is where the canons, the monks and the abbots have lived, and they worked in the Abbey. This was a nice, densely populated part of the Royal Mile. Most people that lived here in the medieval time lived up at the very top, up by Edinburgh Castle. That's where people felt safe. That's where the soldiers were based. And the Canongate gets its name. It's gate as in walk. The canons would have walked up here to give their services to the people who lived on the top part of the Royal Mile. So we aren't, as you can see, able to go ahead of us into the High Street. So we're going to we'll probably pass through hotels.
Oh, this is perfect though. If on the next pass, we'd like to stop at this stoplight right here.
So we're going to go through the traffic lights and we're going to go down left. Do you want us to stop round the corner?
Not on this trip, but next time I will.
Next time, if you do that, we can just, because we'll stop just round the corner then for you, sir.
Perfect.
So you'll know, just say you weren't off on St. Mary Street.
Okay.
And we've got, of course, the pub on the end called the World's End, because there used to be a gate in front of us through this set of traffic lights. It was called the Netherbow Port, and it divided the top part of the Royal Mile from the bottom part of the Royal Mile. Most people lived at the very top of the Royal Mile. They didn't have money to go through the Netherbow Port. The city fathers would go through and give them their holy services, and merchants would go through to give them all their goods. So this is how the pub gets its name. It's of course called World's End because the gate, the Netherbow Port, was for many people here in Edinburgh the end of their world. But this is us still on the old town. We're going down at St. Mary Street, but most of these buildings left and right to now will have been built in the 1800s or part of the restoration of the old town. Now we're going to go through the traffic lights ahead and we'll be turning right into the Canongate. And just ahead of us is all that's left of the Flodden Wall. The old town in 1513 had an old wall around it, the Flodden Wall, and it was built in 1513 after the Battle of Flodden, which took place down in Northumbria in northern England. King James IV of Scotland, his nobility and thousands of men were killed at the Battle of Flodden by the English. On paper, the Scots should have won. Story of our lives, we got beat. Huge disaster for us. We've lost our king, our nobility, and thousands of men. So the people left in Edinburgh built the Flodden Wall that went round the old town to keep out the English. It took them 30 years to build because most of the men had been killed at battle, so it was the men and women and boys that were building the Flodden Wall. All we've got left of the Flodden Wall is that tiny little piece of wall just above the old police box. But the English didn't use it. So we're now on the Cowgate. And the Cowgate gets its name because this is where cattle and sheep would have came along here. There we are, there's the wiggly woggly cattle. You've got the bottom sticking out and the head at the front. So the cattle and sheep would have came along here to be sold in the grass market at the end of this street. So this is how the Cowgate gets its name. And the grass market was a cattle and sheep market in the 1500s. And it was called the grass market because, of course, these animals ate grass. So this is us making our way to the grass market. The Cowgate, it was when, after the Irish famine, many of the Irish came over here and lived down here in the Cowgate, very poor part of the city. Now it is very much a student area, and in August, when all the festivals are on, it will be very busy. Now the pub here on our left, that's the Three Sisters, but the building at the back is the Tailors Guild, which was built in the 1500s, but it's now a football pub. We're going under a bridge, and this is George IV Bridge, one of the 5 bridges of Edinburgh. Edinburgh's got 5 bridges, and it's to do with the Ice Age, hitting the volcanic Castle Rock and creating valleys on either side. So these valleys are dry valleys. So this is us, we're now going into the grass market. So the grass market used to be the cattle and sheep market. It was a land market where vegetables were sold. No longer the case now. The grass market is very much a cafe culture. If you're looking for something to eat or drink, very, very popular. And we've got 2 of the oldest pubs in the city down here in the grass market. And ahead of us, above the rooftops there, you can see Edinburgh Castle. And unfortunately we don't go past stops 9 and 10 now because they are closed off for us getting ready for the festivals. But if you did want to come back and visit the castle, we would be able to let you off on George IV Bridge. Now this little street here on our right, this is Victoria Street, built in 1829, renamed after Queen Victoria in the 1840s, and that's where J.K. Rowling got the idea for Diagon Alley in her Harry Potter books. So this is stopping for the grass market, and you can see all the bars and restaurants here, very popular. We've got the black pub here on our right called The Last Drop. Now it's not your last drop of beer or whiskey, it's your last drop and then you were hanged down here in the grass market. And this is how all these bars and restaurants are here today, because a hanging in the 15, 16, 1700s was entertainment. And of course when people came for the hangings, they needed to have something to eat and drink. So this is where all these bars and restaurants grew up from. And this is a very popular place for Edinburgh people to come on a Friday and Saturday night to have something to eat and drink, catch up with friends. Now just coming up here on our right through the trees, we'll be going to pass at the Green Pub. It's called the White Hart Inn. Written on the side, it was established in 1516. It is still a pub today, over 500 years old. You've got the seating up for just behind us on the top, above the rooftops, for the Royal Military Tattoo, which starts next week. Then here on our right there's number 12, the Black Bull Inn, again established in 1500s, still a pub today. And then you can see just here on our right the side of Edinburgh Castle. Now the castle is actually sitting on volcanic rock, over 340 million years old. The castle's sitting on the plug of the extinct volcano. I believe there's been a settlement on the castle rock since the Bronze Ages. The oldest building in the castle is St Margaret's Chapel, which was built in the 11th century. And we've got the castle esplanade, which was in the 1700s the parade ground for the soldiers based up in Edinburgh Castle. But that's now where the military tattoo takes place every August and has done so since 1950. And people come from right around the world to see the Royal Military Tattoo. Now, if you're going to the castle, I would say you need a good 2.5, 3 hours to see everything that is up there. You've got the big military museum dedicated to the First World War, the Scottish Crown Jewels, second oldest in Europe, the 1 o'clock gun, which is fired at 1 o'clock every day except Sunday, Christmas Day and Good Friday. And we've got the Stone of Destiny up there, Stone of Scone, and that was a stone that the kings and queens of Scotland were crowned on. Edward I, the English king in the 12th century, took the stone down to London, and we didn't get it back till 1996. So that and much, much more are up in Edinburgh Castle. It is open 7 days a week. It opens at 9:30 in the morning. Last entry is 5 o'clock, and then it shuts at 6 o'clock. Now we're passing a pub here on our right called the Burke and Hare. Now it's a certain type of pub. It wasn't that type of pub when I was a girl. That's where actors and actresses used to attend the Burke and Hare, very, very popular. But they're called after 2 Irishmen. Now Burke and Hare came to Edinburgh in the 1800s to work on the Union Canal. They were labourers, very hard work. So to earn extra money, Burke and Hare used to go down into the grass market, meet people in the pubs down there, get them drunk, bring them back to their rooming house, Tanner's Close, and suffocate these drunk people. And that's known as murder by burking after William Burke. The Irishman then sold the bodies on to Dr. Knox, who paid £7.10 for each body, which in the 1820s was a lot of money. And Dr. Knox gave the bodies to the medical students who attended Edinburgh University. They were always desperate for dead bodies to work on, never enough bodies for the medical students, so Burke and Hare filled the gap. But the Irishman got caught. Hare turned King's evidence, and it was William Burke that was hanged down in the grass market. Before he was hanged, he admitted to 16 murders, but we believe there was many more. But he was hanged, and then he was publicly dissected by the medical students. So I think he got his just rewards in the end. In the 1600s, by money donated from George Heriot, the goldsmith, it was originally a free school for fatherless children. It became a private school in the 1800s, but there are still free places today for fatherless children. And that's where J.K. Rowling got the idea for Hogwarts School in her Harry Potter books. Her children were sent to the private school of George Heriot's. And here on our left, this is the old Royal Infirmary. These are the old buildings that are now going to be converted into luxury flats and luxury offices. Now this in fact is all part of Edinburgh University. Edinburgh University, established at the end of the 1500s, famous for medicine. Here on our right, this is the old medical school for Edinburgh University. This is where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle came to study medicine. He wrote the Sherlock Holmes books, and Charles Darwin also attended our medical school. The students are all on holiday. They finished at the end of June. They don't come back till the middle of September. So lots of the buildings round about here are all going to be used for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. The church on our right is no longer a church. It's a little theatre called Bedlam. It holds 90 seats. You can see the name above the door. It was run by Edinburgh University students during August, and it's called Bedlam because this was the Bedlam area of Edinburgh. And we're going to go on to George IV Bridge. The little statue of the dog just here on our right, that's Bobby. Can you see Bobby? The little dog with a gold nose. Bobby was a little Skye Terrier. His master Jock Grey died when the dog was only 2. And his master Jock Grey is buried up there on our left in Greyfriars Churchyard. For 13 years, the little dog kept a vigil on his master's grave. The people of Edinburgh fed the wee dog. And when the wee dog died, it was buried in the flower bed beside his master in Greyfriars Churchyard. Disney made a film in the 1960s. He is the most famous statue in Edinburgh. The Elephant House here on our left, very busy. It's got a big sign in the window, the birthplace of Harry Potter, to say that's where J.K. Rowling started to write the Harry Potter books. in the Elephant House. Now we're coming to the stop on your map if anyone wants off to visit Edinburgh Castle and the Royal Mile. This is the stop we can pull in for you. No, any, sir, do you want to? No? But you can see the Elephant House is very, very busy. It's the cafe. She actually finished writing her Harry Potter books, Deathly Hallows, in the 5-star Balmoral Hotel at the start of Princess Street, and they've got a suite now made up. It's J.K. Rowling's Deathly Hallows suite, but she started writing the books here and then finished up writing them in the Balmoral Hotel. She's done very well out of the Harry Potter books. The George IV Bridge that we're on, one of the 5 bridges of Edinburgh, called after George IV, the king that came to Edinburgh in 1822. Now the building just coming up ahead of us on our left, built in 1889, that is Central Library. And it was built by money donated from Andrew Carnegie. He was the Scotsman that left Dunfermline, went over to America, made his fortune, and he sent money back to the United Kingdom for all the big cities to have libraries built so that everyone could have access to reading materials. So this is Central Library, and it is a very popular library. If anybody's doing any research, it is Central Library that they come to. So this is the stop if anyone wants off for the castle and the Royal Mile. Scotland. It is allowed to hold all the books that are published in the whole of United Kingdom, but of course everything is all on computer discs and such like nowadays. Lots of exhibitions taking place in the National Library of Scotland. So the last letter written by Mary Queen of Scots is in French. She went over to France when she was 6. She was married to the Dauphin of France, and he died when she was only 18. Thank you. So French was very much the language that she was very comfortable speaking. We have had a film just completed, Mary Queen of Scots, and of course we were all laughing here because she spoke broad Scots in the film, and Mary Queen of Scots wouldn't, she would have spoken French. But of course it's just a film, it's just, you can do whatever you want in the film. And the actress that played Mary Queen of Scots was in fact Irish. So they can do, as I say, whatever they want in film. And they did get, in the film, they got the fact that the 2 cousins met. In real life, the 2 cousins never ever met. They wrote to each other, but they never ever met each other. So you can see the last letter written by Mary Queen of Scots is in there. People live in Edinburgh, so it's not a big city, but when all the festivals are on, starting next week, last year we went up to 3 million people here in the city. So if you think it's busy today, just think about us in August. It will be very, very busy. And of course they're coming from right across the world to see all the festivals. We've got the International Festival and the Fringe Festival, and that's what started everything off in 1947, just after the end of the Second World War. So people wanted the people of Edinburgh to have some lightness in their lives, so we started off with the International Festival, and that's more highbrow, still that today, that's your ballet and opera. And then on the outskirts of the International Festival we had the Fringe Festival. And when the Fringe Festival started in 1947 there was only 8 shows. This year's programme has come out and there's 4,000 shows for the Fringe Festival alone. We have a book festival, you'll see that as we go round Charlotte Square. We've got the big military tattoo up on the Castle Esplanade. We have a foodie festival and we've got an art festival. So they all take place here in Edinburgh in August. We're actually getting all prepared for all the festivals. And probably have just seen as we're going round all the posters that are up advertising all the shows. Now that little street here on our left, that's the top of Victoria Street. We're past Victoria Street as we went into the Grass Market. So this is the top of Victoria Street. Now we're going over the Royal Mile. and it is blocked off left and right as we go over, and it's to make it easier for the pedestrians. Because this weekend coming up there will be live street theatre taking place at this part of the Royal Mile. You'll be getting handed out leaflets for all the different shows that are going to be taking place in the city. So they're making it safer for pedestrians, and they're pedestrianising the top part of the Royal Mile. And so this is what you'll see from next week. But look up here on our left, there is the way up to Edinburgh Castle. And then down here on our right at the very bottom, there is the palace and the abbey. So we've left the old town, we're going down Bank Street. The building ahead of us was built at the start of the 1800s. It was built to be the headquarters for the Bank of Scotland. It's now owned by Lloyd's Banking Group, so it's still in banking, and a wonderful example of Georgian architecture. We're now on a hill. This little hill that we're on is called the Mound, and it joins the old town we've just left with the new town in front, and it was built from the rubble we got, the mound of earth that was created from building the new town. Next stop on your map is stop 11. If anyone wants off at the bottom of the hill, want to do shopping along Princes Street, walk along Princes Street Gardens, or to visit the two main art galleries here on our right. Anyone wanting stop 11? No? There's all the posters just going up the side here on our left. So that's Princes Street Gardens. That's just a small amount of the people that are coming, or the shows that are coming to Edinburgh. Edinburgh Fringe is especially for comedy. That's where a lot of comedians start their career, here in the Edinburgh Fringe. So that's West Princes Street Gardens here on our left. Originally private gardens for those with money, now very much public gardens and very well used gardens. So we're crossing over Princes Street and we're now into the new town. The new town started to be built in 1767 because there was fast overcrowding up in the old town that we've just left. It was the young architect James Craig that designed the new town. He designed it on a grid system, and it was built for the nobility and middle classes. So we've crossed over Princes Street, we're crossing over George Street, and then we'll be going into Queen Street. So these were the three main boulevards that were the main residential areas for those with money. And then we're crossing over Rose Street. This was one of the little side streets for the servants and the shopkeepers of those with money. See how wide these streets are. Very, very different from what was up in the medieval old town. Now, up in the old town in the 15, 16, 1700s, the buildings would mostly have been made of wood. They could have been as high as 15 stories high with thatch on the roofs. They had common stairs and rich and poor alike lived together. But when the new town was built, it was built for the nobility and middle classes, and it was built of stone. Craig Leith stone, yellow sandstone from the quarries round about Edinburgh. Now, if you look to your left, this is normally we go along here, but this is us getting prepared for the festivals. So we've got theatres along there and bars, so all ready for next week. So if you look left to right, you can see that the new town is built of stone, Craig Leith stone, and when it was originally built, it was only 3 stories high with an attic and a basement. Up in the attic, that's where the children would have been with their nannies, and then down in the basements were for the kitchens with the scullery maids. And when the new town was built, the old town fell very much into a slum area. The wooden buildings were allowed to fall down, and it was one of our Lord Provost chambers that started the restoration of the old town. So when you're up in the old town, you can see that most of the buildings now are made of stone, many of them built in the middle of the 1800s. But if you look carefully as you walk down, you can see some of the original buildings, some of them only built in the 1400s. Now, the new town was actually built in 7 stages. We're in stage 1, which was built in 1767. But if you look straight ahead of us there, we can see all the different stages of the new town. And the last stage, stage 7, was built in 1890. Behind the trees is actually water. You can't see it this afternoon because of the mist. And that's the Firth of Forth, the river that Edinburgh stands on. And behind the Firth of Forth is the Kingdom of Fife. And that's where the kings and queens of Scotland lived. And that's where the capital city of Scotland used to be. It was Dunfermline right up until the end of the 1300s. And then from the 1400s onwards, the kings and queens of Scotland came over here to Edinburgh, and Edinburgh became the capital city in 1437. The Kingdom of Fife is better known as the home of golf. That's where St Andrews is situated. So we're going along Queen Street, and this is a street that has kept it very much how it was originally built. It's still got that residential feel to it. So you see here on our left, the building's 3 stories high with an attic and down into the basement. The gardens over here on our left, Queen Street Gardens, are still private gardens today. To get a key for the private gardens of Queen Street, you have to either own property around these gardens or live in property around the gardens, and you can pay as much as £500 for a key for the private gardens of Queen Street. They are very well looked after gardens. But again, you can see over here on the right all the posters that are advertising everything that is coming up for the festival. Now we're going to go through the traffic lights ahead, and as we go through the traffic lights, if you look up to your left, this little side street is called North Castle Street, and you'll be able to see why it is called Castle Street. Castle sitting on the top of the hill, sitting on the volcanic rock, over 340 million years old. The castle very much dominating the skyline here in the city. Now we're going to come to the end of Queen Street. We're going through the traffic lights and we're going up into Charlotte Square. Charlotte Square is one of the 2 squares of the new town. Charlotte Square was built at the end of the 1700s. It was designed by Robert Adam, and we've kept Charlotte Square very much how it was originally built. So this is Charlotte Square. Lampposts over here on our left are the original lampposts. When these lampposts were originally lit, it was fish oil that was used to light the lamps, so you can imagine the smell. You'll be glad to know it's electricity that lights these lampposts now. We've got what we call fan lights above the doors, and then the rectangular windows, very much favoured by the Georgians. Now over here on our right, Charlotte Square is very much a private square. Now the only time it is open to the public is in August, when the International Book Festival takes place in the centre of Charlotte Square. So this is what they're in the process of building at the moment. I think it opens up on the 10th of August until the 26th of August. We've got planned over 1,000 authors and writers from right across the world coming to the book festival, with over 900 events taking place. There on our left, there's George Street. You can see it's no traffic along there now, but it is very much easier for people to walk along. George Street is the middle of the main boulevards of the new town. Originally a residential area for those with money, George Street now is very much bars and restaurants with a few selected shops. Now just through the traffic lights in front of us on the right, you can see a dark blue door. In that flat there, on the 3rd of March 1847, that's where Alexander Graham Bell was born, the man that invented the telephone. They say he was trying to invent a hearing aid, as both his wife and mother were profoundly deaf, but he came up with the telephone instead. He spent most of his later years out in Nova Scotia in Canada. Now the next stop on your map is stop 12, if anyone wants off for Charlotte Square, the west end of Princes Street, or to visit the little museum, the Georgian House at number 7. Anyone wanting stop 12? No? Now the building over here on our left, it's actually all covered in scaffolding at the moment. That was originally a church, St George's Church, where Charlotte Square was built, fell into disrepair. This is now the National Records of Scotland. It holds all the land deeds of Scotland and all the criminal records of Scotland. And as you can see by all the scaffolding, it has still got something wrong with it, so they're actually doing the front of the building at the moment, but it is still open to the people that work in the National Records of Scotland. But Charlotte Square is a wonderful example of Georgian architecture. It has got some of the highest property prices in the whole of Scotland are here in Charlotte Square. Most of the townhouses now in Charlotte Square are no longer residential. It's very much big business that can afford to buy the property here in Charlotte Square. Just 3 years ago, a townhouse here in Charlotte Square went for sale. It went for £8 million, so you can see it is big businesses that can afford to buy the property here in Charlotte Square. But when it was originally built, designed by Robert Adam, it was in fact built for the nobility and middle classes. And Robert Adam wanted the fronts of these buildings to look like chateaux. So if you look in front of us on our right, that in front of us is to look like one big long chateau. You can see the sphinxes on either end. But if you look, you can see it is in fact 9 separate townhouses. Most of these are big businesses now. We've got a museum right here, the Georgian House. If you show your bus ticket, you do get a discount into the Georgian House at number 7. Oh, it's actually shut. I didn't realise the time. It's after 4:30. So the Georgian House shuts at 4:15. But if you do get a chance, come back and visit the Georgian House. It shows you how people lived here in the middle of the 1800s, following Lord Lamont and his family from upstairs downstairs. It's a bit like Downton, but on a smaller scale. Now we've got all these cars parked in front of what is supposed to be the big long chateau. And normally what you can see is, in fact, you can just see in front of us at number 10, you can see we've got the pavement and then it drops down and there is a little step. And you'll see that there is a little step outside each of the townhouses in front of the pavement. So that's where the carriages would have stopped for those with money. And then ladies and gentlemen would have stepped out the carriage onto that first little step, onto the pavement, and then up the stairs into their townhouses. But normally we can see that, but because it's Sunday and everybody just parks where they want, it's a wee bit difficult to see. It is still people with money that can afford to live here. We have lots of politicians now here in Edinburgh because we've got our Scottish Parliament. Lots of lawyers live in the city, and because of the medical school, lots of doctors. But if you look and you see just the steps in front of the pavements. So come back tomorrow at number 7 is the museum, but at number 6 is Bute House, and that's the official residence of the First Minister here in Scotland. Did you see what I meant, sir? You know, you've got the steps. They would have got out their carriages, stepped off, and then onto the pavement. So here is Bute House, and that's the official residence for the First Minister here in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon is our First Minister. It's a bit like our 10 Downing Street is in Charlotte Square. So that also helps the price of property in Charlotte Square, the fact we've got the official residence for our First Minister. Now the little monument just here on our left is to a lady called Catherine Sinclair. She was born in 1800. She was all part of the writer set up by Sir Walter Scott. She wrote children's books, but she was famous here in Edinburgh for the good works that she did. She set up soup kitchens so that poor children were able to get a decent meal, and she set up water wells so they were able to get fresh drinking water. But we're going back along Queen Street, and you can see how wide this street is, very, very different from what was up in the old town. Then up on our right there is North Castle Street again. Coming up here on our right, you can see this glass white door. It's got a big blue flat door inside, 52 Queen Street. That's where James Young lived. Then also a professor of midwifery, age 28, but he was the man that used chloroform and got anaesthetic. To see how he used to experiment with the chloroform, he used to invite people round for dinner. After dinner, he would get them to sniff the chloroform. They say that many times when the maid came in to clear the table, there was James Young Simpson and his guests all lying underneath the table. They had sniffed too much of the chloroform. They're saying it's amazing that no one died. But in the 1800s, people were not too keen on using the anaesthetic. People were very superstitious. It wasn't till Queen Victoria was having some difficulty with the birth of Prince Leopold, her 8th child. James Young Simpson was the Queen's midwife. He used the anaesthetic on the Queen. Safe delivery, so after that people were quite keen to start using it. Good enough for the Queen, it was good enough for them. But Simpson was a very well liked and respected man here in Edinburgh. He was the midwife for royalty, the midwife for nobility, but he was the man that did what he could for the ordinary woman in the streets. In the 1800s, many women died during childbirth, so Simpson did what he could to make it safer. When he died in 1870, Queen Victoria wanted to take his body down to London to have him buried in Westminster Abbey. Simpson's wife said no. He's buried here in Edinburgh, in Warriston Cemetery, but we were given a public holiday and over 100,000 people lined the streets to say goodbye to him. He was such a well-loved and respected man. Now we're going to go through the traffic lights. We're going to turn back up Hanover Street. Now the king on the throne when the new town was being built was King George III. So many of the streets here in the new town are called after George III and his family. Charlotte Square is after his queen, Queen Charlotte. George Street ahead is after the king himself. And Street is after the many sons of George III and Prince George family. Now we're going to go through the traffic lights ahead. And the next stop on your map is stop 13. If anyone wants off for Princess Street, Moore Street or George Street. Anyone wanting stop 13? Now if you look over here on our right, these are the buildings that all we cleaned up. So that was the soft yellow sandstone that the new town was built from. So you can imagine when this new town was originally built, how wonderful it would have looked. And it was definitely built from those. Now the green statue at the top of the hill in front of us is to King George IV. He's the king that came to Edinburgh in 1822 on the invite of Sir Walter Scott, the great writer, and we hadn't had a monarch visit us for nearly 170 years, so when the king came we were delighted. And the king came wearing the tartan and the kilt, and we hadn't been allowed to wear either of those since the 1745 Jacobean Rebellion. After the Battle of Culloden in 1746. So when the king came up wearing the tartan and the kilt, we could start wearing them both again. That's a very flattering statue of the king. The statue's tall and thin. The king, in fact, was a wee fat man, little round tummy, bad breath, but he liked the girls. And that's where we get the nursery rhyme. Georgie Porgy, good and high, kissed the girls and made them cry. And that's from King George IV. So we're going down Hanover Street, called after the Hanoverian reign of George III. Now the building in front with all the fancy pillars going round about, that's the Royal Scottish Academy, designed by William Playfair, built as part of the Georgian New Town. It's one of the main art galleries in the city. You can see we've got a big Bridget Riley exhibition on in there at the moment. Some of the exhibitions are free, some you pay for, so you need to go in and see which ones that you would like to visit. And we've got all the pillars that go all the way around the Royal Scottish Academy. You've probably noticed them around the buildings in the Georgian New Town. Edinburgh is quite often referred to as Athens of the Rock, and it's to do with the pillars that are around the buildings here in the New Town. So this is us stopping at the bottom of the mount, if anyone's wanting off here. Flowers. You'll need to go back and look at that bank of flowers. It is in fact the famous floral clock. It's a real live working clock of over 30,000 flowers. We get a new clock every year. The gardeners build the clock, usually start to build it at the end of May, and they will take it away in September. We've had a floral clock here in Edinburgh for over 120 years. The only time we didn't have the clock here in the city was during the Second World War. And every year it's a different theme. This year the theme is to celebrate 100 years since the start of the charity Save the Children. But during the week the gardeners will be at the clock. You'll see them on ladders. They will be pulling out all the weeds, and they love for people to stop and speak to them. They'll spend all day, if you ask them what type of flowers is in the floral clock, when they started to build it, where they got their ideas. They just love for anybody. If you're interested in flowers, you need to go and see the floral clock. And it does have a cuckoo clock. There is a bird box sitting in just at the side of the floral clock, and on the old clock the cuckoo comes out. And it's just at the start of the West Princes Street Gardens. But if you do get a chance, walk along West Princes Street Gardens, and lots of lovely statues and monuments there. You'll see right at the very end, near the end of Princes Street Gardens, there is a big turquoise fountain. That's the Ross Fountain. The Ross Fountain came to Edinburgh in the middle of the 1800s, and for the last 20 years it was a mess. It didn't work, and it was just horrible state. We took it away 5 years ago, and we brought the fountain back just last year. And we've now discovered it's a beautiful shade of turquoise with gold nibs in the fountain and the water coming out. So if you do get a chance, go and visit the Ross Fountain. But also in West Princes Street Gardens, if you've been along, have you seen the statue? There's a big bronze statue of a big bear with a Polish soldier standing next to the bear. And that bear is Wojciech, or Wojciech. Wojciech was found as a cub during the Second World War by Polish soldiers when they were fighting out in Russia. His mother had been killed. So the soldiers took the cub on board, and as he grew bigger, they made him a ration book so that the army captains couldn't get rid of Wojciech the bear, and he helped them lift the heavy ammunition when they were fighting during the Second World War. When the Second World War finished, many of the Polish soldiers came to Edinburgh to live. And they didn't want to leave Wojciech over in Russia, so they made him a passport and they brought him over to Edinburgh, and he lived in Edinburgh Zoo right up until 1962. Now the Polish soldiers and their family always used to go and visit Wojciech, and they used to save up money, and just 4 years ago they got the money to build the great big statue to Wojciech. So if you're in the gardens, children love to sit on the bear. And he's now a wee bit like Bobby, the statue of Greyfriars Bobby. The bear has now got a gold nose because people rub the bear's nose for luck. But the man that made the film The Snowman just this year, he's announced that he's going to do the story of Wojciech the bear, and it's going to be made into a film next year. So if you do get a chance, it is wonderful to go and see the statue. But there's lots. There is a theatre down there, the Ross Bandstand, and that came to Edinburgh in the 1930s. We do have lots of concerts. Lots of the concerts take place in August when all the festivals are on.